Okay, responding to Jack's MBTI versus Socionics video. Couple things here that I think are worth talking about is, you know, it's a tough comparison here, in my opinion, because I understand what Jack's doing, but at the same time, he's not talking about a specific thing, you know? Like, it's not made clear, are we comparing Socionics to the original Gifts Differing by Isabel Myers and Catherine Briggs, or are we comparing it to the current MBTI company as it stands today? Are we comparing it to, David Kersey, which isn't even MBTI? It's not Myers Briggs. David Kersey doesn't even use cognitive functions, so it's weird to compare Socionics to Kersey. Like, at least if you compare Socionics to, the original Gifts Differing, you can at least compare how they define cognitive functions and describe them. And you can go, okay, here's how we describe SE, here's how they describe SE. Here's how we describe SI, here's how they describe SI. Here are the difference, here's why we think we're right, etc., etc. At least then you could do that kind of comparison. With Kersey, you can't, because it's just letter dichotomies and temperament. He doesn't use cognitive functions. So it to me, that comparison's a little bit rubbish. But I know why Jack did it, because he's basically saying, when he says MBTI, Jack basically means like the conglomeration slash clusterfuck of whatever it is the internet meme BTI community and all the stereotypes and blah, 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 blah. That's what he's comparing Socionics to, which, I mean, okay. You can do that, I guess. It's weird, but you can do that. I guess he's like, Socionics versus the meme BTI culture, essentially, is essentially what you're doing there. Because David Kersey is not Myers-Briggs or MBTI. But whatever. I get what he's saying. Like, people, have these stereotypes in their head that, connect to Kersey, and it's all mixed up together and blah, 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 blah. Now, I think one thing here that is worth thinking about is that sort of the framing, Jack is saying, Socionics versus MBTI. So we already know that, he says MBTI is referring to that clusterfuck on the internet, whatever. Not referring to any specific incarnation of it, He's also bringing up David Kersey, which is an MBTI. So he's comparing his Socionics to that, clusterfuck. But here's the interesting part. When Jack says Socionics, I think one thing that is overlooked here is that there's like a dozen schools of Socionics. Do you think they all agree? No fucking way they do. You compare Jack's Socionics, which, when Jack says Socionics, I think he should really say WSS, because that, Jack's got his own interpretation that is at odds with other schools of Socionics. I think people should be clear, like, you can't just say Socionics, just like you can't just say MBTI, because you're referring to too many things. Like, there's too many things that are called Socionics. There are too many things that are associated with MBTI. Okay? WSS is going to be different than Galenko's Socionics. It's going to be different than, what was the one that Timmer does, the Archetype Center? It's going to be different than that one. There's way more schools. Like, I'm barely scratching the surface here. Like I said, dozens of schools. Lots. Endless amounts. Okay, probably not endless amounts, but there's a lot, okay? 99.9% of us have not even scratched the surface of all the fucking literature that's out there of that shit. If you compared, I'm sure, Jack's work to, even the original Socionist, Augusta, whatever the fuck, however you say her name. I know they're gonna make fun of me now for fucking up her name, but whatever. Guaranteed they have areas where they don't agree, or their shit doesn't line up. There's gonna be differences there. But Jack's still saying this is Socionics. It's hard to just say we do Socionics over here when what Socionics can be and can mean is so broad because there's so many schools. The same way, Jack refers to MBTI and is pointing at this big clusterfuck over on the internet. he acts like there's a standard of socionics, and that's the WSS standard. Um, and listen, this is not me saying Jack is wrong. I'm not arguing that Jack is less correct than these other schools. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that when Jack goes around and says this is how we type in socionics, he's really talking about how he types in WSS, which is one school of socionics. And people get into socionics, they only know about WSS. I mean, they know about other schools, but they've only really invested in the WSS understanding in the West, at least. Don't get me wrong, there's people who get into Galenko and stuff. I've been typed by Galenko, other people have, whatever. It's different. There's plenty of dichotomies that Jack doesn't think are as important that other socionics do. Like, for example, Jack doesn't think, when I can tell, that rational versus irrational is very important. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I'm not arguing that right now. I'm just saying that there's differences within socionics, just like there's a bunch of different shit in the, Jungian MBTI clusterfuck. There's also a clusterfuck in socionics that I feel like Jack maybe ignores, or maybe he knows that's an issue, but he also sees it like, he's in the West and he has the opportunity to make WSS the standard, which I understand. I understand wanting to have a standard that everyone's using, that way it's less messy. I get that that's probably what Jack's doing, because he's a smart guy. He probably knows that his socionics is not the only socionics. He might genuinely believe his is the best, which fair enough. I'm sure he has reasons to think that. People sometimes, I think, coming from like the WSS community would be like, well, here's how it works in socionics. It's like, no, that's how it works in WSS. That's not all of socionics. Now you might argue, well, this is the best socionics. Okay, fair enough. But you might even be correct, but I guarantee they haven't, when they say that, they haven't actually like looked into every other school. And I'm sure other schools are measuring different things. They just happen to be using the same words, and it's a big mess, just like all of typology is a big mess. But yeah, it's like you compare Jack's work to, if you look at like Gregory Ryan and stuff and all those dichotomies, there's lots of that shit that's technically socionics that Jack doesn't fucking use. Jack did a lot of people just think Jack's just the standard socionics guy. Like, Jack's done a lot of his own thinking, and he's cut a lot of the fat that he thinks is useless in the socionics world. Like, there's a lot of dichotomies that Jack thinks are rubbish, whether it be the Ryan dichotomies or whatever. Like I said, or irrational, rational. He doesn't think that is that important. Like, Jack's done a lot of his own thinking and cut a lot of the fat that he doesn't think is relevant. You go to other schools, they think those same things that Jack cut out are important, and they're still technically called socionics. So when you hear Jack call, what he's doing socionics, remember there's a catch there. There's a part of the picture that isn't being shown to you. And I'm pretty sure it's intentional. I'm not calling Jack dishonest. I think he just wants us there to be a standard like anyone would. I get it. But